Hello, hello, hello. I hope you guys are feeling amazing today. Welcome to Life Discussions with Dr. Jefferson. I am your host, Dr. Jefferson, and I want to welcome you guys to this very impromptu subject matter. So, surprisingly so, one of my staff members suggested I come on and I talk about this a little bit before I kind of dive into my last session of the day. And I do feel like it's important for us to discuss because at the end of the day, people go through very distressing moments, and sometimes we can't call a thing because we have not been conditioned to do so. So I have to say, shout out to the chat. Hey, you guys, thank you for watching. And this will be kind of brief. So I may not necessarily get to your comments or whatever and posting them as I usually do, but I will definitely do like responses or replies after the fact or whatever if I don't get to, you know, the comments or whatever. Um, so let's take a look here. Let me bring this up so we can take a look. And we're gonna read NPR's report on Simone Biles and some of the symptoms, some of the things that she was feeling. But prior to us really jumping into that, I want to say this, as a quick disclaimer. Sometimes we go through life and we have been conditioned to suppress so many emotions that we don't know how to adequately self-regulate because we don't even know how to recognize the emotions that come along with heavy distress, and we don't even know how to identify distress accurately. So the first thing I'll say is that distress can be positive or negative distress, but the responses in our system viscerally is pretty much the same. Everything starts with your brain. It starts the way that we receive and process where we are, what we have going on, and how we will probably, not necessarily always, but probably respond to it and what that means. Okay. So, a couple of things. Let's look at this. A couple of things. She said that she had taken notice of, how she was feeling, and that didn't align with what people on the outside had observed of her. Okay. And the DSM, or Diagnostic Statistical and Mental Disorders, is pretty much a clinician's Bible to understanding the presentation of symptoms in people who are experiencing mental disorders and are having an infringement upon their mental health. So, in the description, you guys know I said the end of mental illness versus mental disorders, because disorders will occur all throughout our lives. But, if we're looking at the medical system, which is the organ responsible for receiving and processing distress, your brain, and the way that your temporal lobe responds to and restructures or reorganizes the distress, and the way that your prefrontal cortex then stores that information, and the way that your hippocampus is responsible for cognitive processing overall. If we're looking at all of that, and then we look at the very important role of your amygdala, which are the two organs in the very back middle of your brain, we understand that that reptilian component of your brain can sometimes take over, and as a result cause you significant distress, whether it is psychological or physiological. Okay, so it gets you off your game, knocks you off kilter, makes you function at a capacity that is beneath or above your standard baseline. As a result, you're not your best self. You typically screw things up, and that's even more distress. Okay, negative connotated distress. So, let's go to read this a little bit before I get to explaining panic disorder to you guys and panic attacks. All right, let me see. How can I pull this up to go there? Okay, there it is. So Simone Biles' decision to pull out of the women's team Final has prompted comments and analysis around the world, including much praise for Biles' choosing to prioritize her mental health. Biles spoke at length about her decision, saying she was shaking before the Olympic team gymnastic final and that she withdrew after realizing the mental's not there. And for those of you who really don't understand what that means, is that, like I said, everything starts in your brain. So if your mentality is not one that's already reduced in its amount of stress that it's presenting associated with the event that you're going to go ahead and participate in, you won't be able to function. Some people even become catatonic, and catatonia is a symptom to where you're just basically frozen in state. Don't even know it, but you ain't moving nowhere, can't go nowhere, can't do anything. So physiologically, immobile, dead to most. Okay. Um, so Biles has now also withdrawn from the individual all around competition. Here's NPR's transcript of what she said at the news conference that followed Tuesday's team event, in which the U.S. women won silver. Now, I want you guys to pay attention to this because I want you to look at her teammates' perception versus her perception. Her decision to withdraw after her vault in the final, I just felt like it would be a little bit better to take a back seat, work on my mindfulness, and I knew the girls would do an absolutely great job. And I didn't want to risk the team a medal for kind of my screw ups. So let's talk about that. Now, if she's practicing mindfulness, exercises, and for those of you who don't know what mindfulness exercises are, they're a part of a segue to meditation. So it's us becoming more aware of our physical, mental, emotional, spiritual components of us that keep us in alignment every day and keep us functioning at maximum expected capacity. So that's what that is. Typically, people use a DBT manual as a means to an end, to get there. It's pretty detailed as long as you have a clinician that's following in therapy in regular sessions, helping you to understand what these different components mean, what these different sections in the workbook really mean, and how they can apply to your life in, the reality of it all, right? So let's go here. Overall health status. No injury, thankfully. And that's why I took a step back, because I didn't want to do something silly out there and get injured. That's the component where I'm telling you guys that if you are experiencing extreme mental distress or brain distress, what happens is those different organs that I named in your brain, the most important one that is, important to this situation, which is the amygdala, it takes over. And when your reptilian brain takes over, all those other components that I just talked about have no dog in the fight. They can't even function. They're shut down. So the synapses and all type of communication from those neuroreceptors are limited, restricted, no access whatsoever. So you're operating from a fear-based response system that your cognitive faculties are not there to appropriate your responses or behaviors. Okay. So anything can happen. It's like putting somebody in there that's not an Olympian to perform the same event, essentially. So she says it's been really stressful with the Olympic Games. I just think that as a whole, not having an audience, there's a lot of different variables going into it. And that speaks to a whole other component. It's been a long week. It's been a long Olympic process. It's been a long year. So just a lot of different variables. And I think we're just a little bit too stressed out, but we should be out here having fun. And sometimes that's not the case. So she is definitely taking it easy, and not doing too much, not over, stepping or overdoing it. And I'm really, really happy for her, considering all things. Here is the most important thing to remember. Like I said, you can have good distress that can put you over the edge, or you can have bad distress that can put you over the edge. But the most important thing is to remember to regulate appropriately. So recognize what you're feeling, right? And then recognize underlying emotions that are responsible for those said feelings and apply principles that allow you to de stress and decompress. Now, here's the thing, if she's obviously working with a clinician because she knows to do these things, but also she is aware of when she's at capacity. So we have to be permissive with ourselves. We have to be non competitive with the people around us and the environment around us, and non comparative as well. Every day, people walk through the world and experience significant distress that qualifies as a clinical anxiety disorder. However, they just push through. You know why? That's one of the things that we have incorporated over time as one of those learned behaviors in response to we have to make it, or success looks like this. However, perseverance and personal persecution are two different things. So I have to say it makes more sense for her to not self-sabotage and not sabotage the team and take a step back. Excuse me. Mm, these allergies. But and take a step back so that they have a higher propensity to win the games, right? In which they did. Now, her teammates thought that she contributed to them winning. She thought that she contributed to them not winning at all. And what that says is the negative thoughts that go along with the process of having a panic attack, heart palpitations are a part of that. There is just so much going on. Okay. The stress that she said that she experienced with her shaking is a very significant component to it. But the thing is, panic disorder is different from panic attacks, because a panic disorder typically involves situations where the social situation isn't always the indicator. Sometimes they're just sporadically, triggered. Nobody knows exactly what it is that makes them come, but they happen more frequently than not. Typically, people have struggled with them on and off from time to time without knowing what triggers them for over a month. And that's what makes it a panic disorder versus social inhibition disorder, or, social anxiety disorder, and, these types of things. But panic attacks, outside of it being a disorder, mimics the same feature, and we have an identifiable trigger. And that's typically social situations or high stress situations. Um, you have the fear of losing control, like she was thinking of, because she's obviously been in a panic state before. You have the derealization part, right? Feelings where you're just dissociating from the moment and you're just not living in reality. Chest pain and discomfort, nausea and vomiting, dizziness, chills, hot and cold sensations, um, paresthesias. I think like that's the numbing and the tingling that people typically get. Like all of a sudden they start feeling feelings of numbness and sometimes tingles going down their back, mid back, down your fingers, down your arms. And some people think that they're having a heart attack because of the associated chest pain and heart palpitations and the pounding and accelerated heart rate and things like that. But trembling and shaking are definitely a part of it. Sweating, there is a lot. Many people feel like they cannot swallow, they're choking, they can't come up from air, and the most prevalent symptom is they feel like they're not going to be able to get out of this, and they feel like they're going to die. So many people just feel like, okay, I just need to move myself away from the world. And it doesn't matter if you tell them to calm down, and typically that makes it even worse, to be honest with you. They just are not there to be able to gauge whether or not this is an actual threat that they have perceived. And that's one of the main things I think that we definitely need to be looking at. So, if we're doing our due diligence, we recognize that panic distress is a huge issue. It's an issue for Simone. It's an issue for all people that are playing team sports. It's an issue for people playing individual sports. It's an issue. Period. Right. So we have to be permissive, and we have to allow this woman to have her moment to recalibrate so she can be her best version of herself. Because the thing about panic and anxiety disorders is that they prevent us from being able to be our best version of ourselves. It prevents us from being able to see ourselves authentically and function at full capacity and reap those rewards. So, if you or someone that you know is pushing past, right, moving around clinically significant distress that takes you out of your moments to where you're dissociating and fading into an abyss, I think you should definitely encourage those people to get help. And if it's you should definitely get help as well. But more importantly, you have to be permissive. Give yourself space to actualize what's going on, and allow yourself to be 100% congruent with best practices. And that's finding somebody to talk to, taking deep breaths, deep breaths in, slowly letting it out. Muscle relaxation techniques are really great. Grounding exercises outside in the grass or in the sand are really good. Put in the grass or the sand underneath your feet. Floating to the moments that make you feel heavy distress, and then removing that said distress by being grounded in your center where you are. Um, the manifestation moon is coming up now. I am an elemental person. So I think that the elements can help, essential oils. There are a lot of things that could be helpful for you, but the most important thing is for you to recognize when you are over your limit or over capacity. We have to be people who stop letting people impede on that personal space. So just because the world is depending on you to do a thing doesn't mean that you should be doing a thing. Get yourself together first. Focus inward on yourself. As a result of that, you can be more present for other people. We are nothing if we're not emotionally available for the things and the people and the deeds that we attach ourselves to. So we can't do a good job if we're half assing it because we have not done our individual work before we got there. Okay. So shout out to her. I'm really, really excited about this shift in team sports. I'm really, excited to see what that brings for other people playing other sports. Naomi Osaka is another one who was a huge advocate for keeping yourself calibrated before entering into these games. And let me tell you guys something. Everybody is currently going through a significant period of adjustment right now, and that causes clinically significant distress anyway. Like, we've literally seen a significant increase in suicidal ideation, homicidal ideation, acute psychosis, anxiety and panic disorders, depression, all of it. So we have to be people that call a thing a thing. People's brains are being rewired because the world is being restructured all of a sudden. So, not slow evolution, pressured change. What do they say? Pressure busts pipes. Literally, everything starts in your brain. So, you have to protect your peace. Do what it is you think you need to do for yourself unapologetically. If you need to take a break, take a break. If you think it's all overwhelming and you really want to be there for your family and you want to be supportive, you first have to be supportive of yourself. And if you want to be supportive of your team, you first have to be supportive of yourself. So do your self work so you can get back to doing the collective work with the team. I like the fact that her teammates supported her. um I'm really excited about this, you guys. And I think that people should all over the world be excited about it too. People have got to put more faith in their internal belief systems of self, their higher power, and trusting what it is that your spirituality grounds and guides you to as it relates to you making sure that your energy center is protected and you're not overdoing it. Okay. So that's all that I have. I gotta get back to work. You guys take care of yourselves and make sure that the people that are connected to you are equally taking care of themselves and that you are advocating for balance and structure, and not only in your own life, but also in other people's lives. If you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. We don't want to be people who are permeable and therefore invaded every single time we turn around. We don't have an individual, high sense of self or solid sense of self. We're just whatever the world says we are, whenever the world says. Keep yourself strong, healthy, and balanced. Okay. Um, that's pretty much all that I have. Let me check out you guys' comments. My last couple of minutes says she did what she felt was right. Unfair is unfair, no matter how you feel about it. Why is it that you guys feel like it's unfair? Is what I'm curious about. I think people looked at what's that girl named Sha'Carri Richardson, and Sha'Carri Richardson obviously struggled from the exact same thing, that heavy distress, but responded with substances. And instead of numbing, this person decided to make a viable means to keep her energy center protected. And now she's under fire. That's interesting, the way that the world is kind of, you know, normalizing the numbing, avoiding, not self regulating, reacting negatively, impacting our brains and our functional systems negatively. That's really interesting to me. Moneyboy Trey says Simone Biles is a quitter, period. I don't think she's done. Sanisa Lee for enduring the unwanted pressure, bringing home the goal. I mean, for everybody, I think the pressure is different. I think that we have to definitely, and that's why I said know what your limits are, right? So all of our limits are not the exact same. I mean, whereas some people are extremely sensitive to a lot of pressure, what they consider to be a lot of pressure maybe may not be a lot of pressure for the next person. And so the next person responds in a different way and they're like, man, you work really great under pressure. And that person's like, there was never any pressure for me. That has to do with the way that you see yourself in comparison to the world. If you're a person who operates from a place of secure sense of self and you don't seek to, have that external validation by way of having people compare you to other people in the world, then guess what? You kind of remain tethered. And you're there for very high stress, normally high stress events, because the performance anxiety never presents for you versus another person who's like, man, having people in the stands, you got to pay attention to what she said, in her narrative. Having people in the stands is a point of contention for her. It gives her comfort, just knowing that she's been watched by people who admire her, right? Who are cheering her on. And that gives her a sense of peace. And obviously, she didn't have that now. So, I mean, and you've had some pilots that definitely. So there are a lot of things that you guys don't hear about and you don't know. There are some pilots who tap out, who completely dissociate, and they struggle from anxiety disorder. And it's also a reason that people sought to go back and reframe the way that mental health was kind of viewed. Um, I don't really have the time now, but maybe I'll do a more comprehensive segment to give you guys a little bit of history taking of the connotations that are negative associated with mental illness as it relates to politics, as it relates to jobs and things like that. Long time ago, in the 90s, there was this incident. Okay, I'll talk about that one because that's the most recent. In the 90s, there was this incident with a politician. This guy was elected for office, and once he was elected for public office, somebody found out that he had been treated for, I think, depressive disorder, either anxiety disorder or generalized anxiety disorder or major depressive disorder. I think that it was one or the other. And as a result of him having been treated and having seen a psychotherapist for these particular symptoms that presented as a result of those disorders, he was pushed out of office. So, reality is this: people suffer from clinically significant distress every single day. We don't judge people when they're struggling with diabetes. We don't judge people when they're struggling with heart disease. We don't judge people when they're struggling with cancer, but we're very quick to judge people who are struggling with anxiety disorder, panic disorder, and other clinically significant mental health disorders. So I think that we have to be more mature people and understand that these are medical disorders that affect the brain in a certain way, like everything else. The fMRI scans have told us that, the science has told us that. Whoever hasn't recognized that by now, I feel really bad for you. I think that you've got to do your due diligence, do a little bit of history taking, education seeking, educate yourself so you can elevate yourself to a higher level of understanding of what it is that these people are going through and what these changes and shifts that took place in the 90s as a result of that political event, by the way, what those things mean. So that is all that I have. I hope that you guys took something from this show that you're able to apply in your everyday life and then elevate yourself. And I look forward to seeing you guys soon. See you guys later. Bye.
Well, I can't put me in a box. I redefine any definition you got. I am the tiger, I'm making steps to the top. The flames, I whip it up, you just gotta hand me the rock. Take a seat, you cannot stand it. All I know, the flow harder than a Scotch bunny. Don't try studying me, you cannot manage. This ain't what you want, bitch, I'm a fucking phenomenon. This ain't what you want, bitch, I'm a fucking phenomenon.